Our cameras today captured pool maintenance underway in the backyard of Nancy Guthrie's home. Earlier this week, a delivery driver accidentally tried to drop off a pizza at the front door, and that prompted a social media statement from the sheriff's department saying in part, quote, "We can't believe we have to say this, but media on scene, please do not order food delivery to a crime scene address."
2 predators, a single clinical execution, and an 84-year-old woman who evaporated into the midnight air without a heartbeat of warning. No shattered glass, no frantic cries, no trail of blood. Only a hollow house and a family whose silence has become a deafening, weeks-long enigma. The headlines are feeding you a lie. While every major news cycle obsessively hunts for a lone shadow in a mass, they are ignoring a truth that has been hidden in plain sight since the first yellow tape was strung. The physical reality of this crime scene shatters the lone wolf theory. We aren't looking for one monster. We're looking for a team. Evidence collected from the core of the investigation has finally coughed up a secret. 2 distinct, unidentified DNA profiles. 2 men who don't exist in the system. They aren't Nancy Guthrie, they aren't her bloodline, and they are ghosts to the FBI's database of 19 million violent offenders. The first biological signature was pulled from deep within Nancy's private sanctuary. The second was a chilling discard, a glove recovered 2 miles from the site of her disappearance. 2 ghosts, 2 separate hunting grounds, and 1 terrifying, coordinated strike that was never meant to be solved.
Break a little news on your program here that I spoke with a detective earlier today, and effective Monday, this investigation will essentially be moved to the task force entirely.
This is exactly why the lone wolf narrative has been a lie from the start. The forensics have screamed coordinated team since the first officer crossed the threshold. You're watching Weather Drives. If you've seen part 1, you already know the chilling foundation of this mystery. Nancy Guthrie, 84 years old, and the mother of NBC Today's show anchor Savannah Guthrie, simply ceased to exist on February 1st. She vanished from her sanctuary in the Catalina foothills of Tucson, Arizona, leaving behind a home with no broken locks, no physical remains, and a trail that has led to 0 arrests. But today, we are moving past the headlines. We are dissecting the shadows of 2 specific individuals whose names have been tethered to this investigation from the very first hour.
There's a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes that absolutely they are looking into, and every single night, yeah, I think the sheriff saying that the subject should be scared, that's without a doubt.
2 men, a 19-year bond, and a blueprint for a disappearance. Before we go any further, let's be crystal clear. I am not leveling accusations. I am simply laying out the cold, documented facts and showing you the terrifying picture that emerges when the pieces finally click into place. We begin with a timeline of a haunting. At 1:47 a.m., Nancy's doorbell camera was forced into darkness. At 2:28 a.m., the Bluetooth link between her pacemaker and her iPhone severed. That leaves a 41-minute void. 41 minutes where a predator was inside her sanctuary while the rest of the world slept. To understand the gravity of that gap, look at the math of crime. A professional burglar wants out in 5 minutes. 10 minutes is a gamble. 20 is a suicide mission. But 41 minutes, that isn't a panic. That is total, chilling comfort. In those 41 minutes, Nancy had to be found. She had to be subdued. The sheriff himself called her sharp and alert. She wasn't someone who would just give up. She had to be prepped, guided through the shadows of her own halls, and loaded into a waiting vehicle. All of this while someone kept a lookout for the flicker of a neighbor's porch light. For one person, that's an impossible workload. Former FBI negotiator Chip Massey has stated that managing an elderly captive while simultaneously handling high-stakes logistics is a breaking point for a lone individual. But for 2, the burden is halved. 1 controls Nancy, the other controls the perimeter. The 41 minutes stop being reckless. It becomes a clinical, methodical operation. This wasn't a crime of opportunity. It was a masterclass in preparation. 9 days before Nancy vanished, a shadow moved past a home 6 miles away. They didn't just walk, they walked backward. That isn't a quirk, it's a tactical exploit. Security cameras like Ring rely on infrared sensors that need a 2-second handshake to start recording. If you walk forward, the camera catches your eye. Walk backward, and by the time the lens wakes up, it only sees the back of your skull. This individual knew the exact technical lag of the hardware and weaponized it. When a dog barked, they didn't flinch or spin around. They suppressed every human instinct to stay anonymous. On February 1st, that same Ozark Trail backpack returned, but the mask of caution was gone. The suspect walked straight to Nancy's camera and tapped the lens twice, a familiar, almost affectionate gesture. January 23rd was the dress rehearsal. When the silence held, he knew the stage was set. By the early hours of February, the testing was over. The execution had begun. To understand how this ends, you have to understand the roles. In every coordinated strike, there is an architect and an operative. The architect is a ghost. He never sets foot on the crime scene because he doesn't have to. He is the source of the God view, the floor plans, the gate codes, the exact moment the meds kick in, and the blind spots in the security. He didn't need to surveil the house because he already lived in its secrets. The operative is the muscle, the one with the stomach to cross a threshold at 2 a.m., the one with the grit to handle a live extraction, and the one whose silhouette is currently burned into an FBI bulletin.
Acknowledge there's a ransom note. It appears to me that the investigators aren't 100% convinced and slick.
And here is who those roles appear to fit in this case, based entirely on public records and documented information. Tommaso Taione, 50 years old, born in Tuscanini, Italy, married to Annie Guthrie, NY's eldest daughter since 2006. That is 20 years of marriage, 20 years of family dinners, 20 years of walking through NY's front door, past her cameras, through her security gate, and through her home. He teaches advanced placement biology at a charter school in Tucson. He also plays bass guitar in a local band. And he was the last confirmed person to see Nancy Guthrie alive. On the evening of January 31st, Tommaso personally drove Nancy home from dinner. The sheriff confirmed to the New York Times that he walked her to her front door at approximately 9:50 p.m. He watched her go inside, then drove 4 miles back to his own home. So 3 hours and 57 minutes later, the doorbell camera went dark. No independently verified alibi for Tommaso during that window has ever been made public. He and his wife Annie share a home. Whatever alibi one of them provides, the other can confirm. That is not independent corroboration. Consider what someone with his level of access to that home would already know without conducting a single minute of external surveillance. He would know those Nest cameras were not actually recording. Nancy did not have an active cloud storage subscription. The cameras could detect motion and send alerts, but no footage was being saved. The FBI had to contact Google directly to recover fragmented residual data from backend servers. The only people who would know those. The cameras were non-functional, are people who spent significant time inside that home quietly noticed the storage subscription was never activated. He would know the front security gate, the iron gate the suspect passed through on February 1st, without leaving a single print or tool impression. No damage at all. Either Nancy had left it unlocked, which is entirely possible for a woman who had felt safe in the same home for 40 years, or someone had made sure it would be open. Someone who had been standing at that exact gate hours earlier, saying goodnight. He would know the medications sitting on the counter. NY's essential daily prescriptions were left behind during those 41 minutes. For a ransom operation, those medications are the most critical items in the entire house. Eddie Zaw is an 84-year-old with a pacemaker and heart condition who does not receive her daily medication and does not survive long enough for any ransom to be collected. Leaving those pills behind means one of two things. Either the person who took her had no idea about her medical needs, or they already knew she would not need them. And then there is the Olympic schedule. Savannah Guthrie was assigned to cover the Winter Olympics for NBC months in advance. Nancy was taken on the exact weekend Savannah was scheduled to be on the other side of the world. If you wanted to target Nancy during a window when her most prominent family member was unavailable and occupied, who would know that travel calendar? Someone who heard it mentioned at a family dinner. One more detail that matters here. Tommaso Taione teaches AP biology at the college level. So his students learned PCR amplification, the same core technique forensic labs use to process crime scene DNA. They learned gel electrophoresis, the same method used to build the genetic profiles entered into federal databases. The suspect on the porch wore black nitrile gloves, the same gloves used in every biology classroom in the country. Nitrile gloves are rated for chemical resistance, not forensic prevention. Micro tears form during physical exertion, especially around the fingertips. Internal moisture builds up within minutes. If you are wearing nitrile gloves while physically handling another person, lifting them, controlling their movement, that moisture can breach the material. A biology teacher would understand that completely. Which means a biology teacher would also understand to dispose of those gloves miles from the scene rather than anywhere near the property. Someone found a glove anyway, 2 miles from NY's home. DNA from an unknown male is inside it, not in Cody's. No match. Tommaso Taione has no criminal record. His DNA is not in Cody's. If that glove contained his DNA, the result in the database would look exactly the way it currently looks. Unknown. No match. Now, here is where the second individual enters this picture. Because everything I just described about Tommaso points toward one specific role, the planner, the insider, the person whose value is information and access rather than physical presence at the scene. But someone still had to physically walk up to that porch at 2 in the morning. And the FBI's description of that person is specific. All male, 5 feet 9 inches to 5 feet 10 inches, average build, ski mask, dark clothing, nitrile gloves, Ozark Trail backpack. Former FBI profiler Jim Clementi noted what appeared to be a tattoo or a distinctive marking visible on the suspect's right wrist. Dominic Aaron Lee Evans, 48 years old, elementary school teacher in Tucson, drummer in a local band called Early Black alongside Tommaso. Tie-in since 2007, 19 years together. They connected through classified ads. Evans found a guitarist through Craigslist. 1 Second Sound responded to a listing in the Tucson Weekly. They recorded their debut album together at Loveland Studios in late 2009. They named it Life, Love, and Murder. Evans stands at approximately 5 feet 9 inches, average build. publicly photographed with a mustache and goatee that matches the FBI physical description. And in publicly available performance footage from early Black, there is a marking visible on his right wrist that is consistent with what Jim Clemente described from the FBI surveillance footage. Height, build, facial hair, wrist marking. Every data point in the FBI's physical description corresponds to Dominic Evans. Evans also has felony records in Puma County: burglary, robbery, theft, and embezzlement. These are not rumors or allegations. These are entries in the Pima County Judicial Database. Burglary is unlawful entry into a structure with intent to commit a crime inside it. Robbery is the taking of property from a person through force or intimidation. The documented criminal history in those records overlaps with what happened inside Nancy Guthrie's home. And here is the forensic detail that matters. And neither DNA profile from this case matched anything in Kudus. For someone with multiple felony convictions, the absence from that federal database requires an explanation. Arizona's DNA collection laws have changed over time. If Evans' convictions predate the mandatory collection protocols for those specific offense categories, or if those cases resolved through plea agreements that did not trigger DNA submission requirements, he could carry a documented criminal history in the court system while remaining completely invisible to federal DNA databases, a criminal record, and no DNA on file. Evans told the New York Times he had met Nancy Guthrie exactly once at an Easter egg hunt in 2011. He said he learned about her disappearance through Instagram and reached out to Tommaso privately to offer support. So, a national kidnapping case is dominating every platform. Your bandmate's mother-in-law is the victim at the center of the story. And your first move is a private message to the man at the center of the investigation. That could be a friend offering genuine support, but it could also be a post-operational contact, a status check framed as concern. The question is not whether the message was sent. Evans confirmed that himself. The question is what investigators found when they pulled the metadata, the timing, and whether the private communication pattern between Evans and Cyan shifted in the weeks leading up to February 1st. Evans said investigators interviewed him for 40 minutes and have not been back in touch. 40 minutes is a preliminary conversation, not a forensic investigation. The fact that they have not called him back could mean they cleared him. Or it could mean they no longer need his cooperation because the evidence being built through cell tower data, purchase records, vehicle tracking, and genetic genealogy does not require anyone to sit in a room and answer questions. The sheriff publicly cleared the immediate family, all siblings and spouses. Dominic Evans is not a sibling. He is not a spouse. He is a bandmate. And his name did not appear once in that public statement. Now, I want to address the gear argument because it keeps coming up in comment sections. The suspect showed up in a $20 Ozark Trail backpack from Walmart with reflective safety strips still attached, a cheap ski mask, a belted band holster configured incorrectly over a thick jacket. Firearms expert John Correa stated publicly that nobody with even one day of tactical training would wear a holster that way. The argument from people defending Cyan is that an AP biology teacher would never look that operationally unprepared. The gear is too cheap. The setup is too sloppy. Consider the opposite angle. If you are an educated person planning a serious crime you cannot afford to be associated with, one of the most important things you control is the investigative profile that gets built to describe you. Show up in professional tactical gear with proper equipment, and FBI profilers construct a description of a highly organized, disciplined, educated individual. That profile narrows quickly toward people like science teachers. But show up in clearance aisle gear with a holster on backward and the reflective strip still glowing under infrared. And FBI profilers describe a disorganized, impulsive, low-level offender, someone who has never executed anything serious. And investigators stop looking at the methodical educator 4 miles away. That is not incompetence. That is a deliberate choice about how to be perceived. And based on 6 weeks of media coverage, it has been working. The vehicle, Elias and Danielle, a couple living approximately 2.5 miles from NY's property on a residential back road, captured 12 vehicles passing on their Ring camera between midnight and 6 a.m. on February 1st. One appeared at 2:36 in the morning. NY's pacemaker disconnected at 228. An NBC correspondent drove the route between NY's home and that camera location and timed it at 6 minutes. 228 plus 6 minutes puts that vehicle at 234. It appears on camera at 236, a 2-minute margin, consistent with the driver who pulled out of Nancy Street, removed a mask, and then drove onto that back road. Retired NYPD Detective Pat Broen assessed the vehicle as a Kia Soul. The sheriff confirmed to NBC that the vehicle timing aligns with the abduction window and is part of the active investigation. That couple's home sits outside the 2M search radius law enforcement originally canvassed. Nobody knocked on their door. They came forward on their own. How many other cameras between 2 and 5 miles from NY's home captured something relevant that nobody has reviewed yet? The ransom demand was $6 million in Bitcoin. Not 5 million, not 10, 6 million specific. That is the kind of figure that reflects knowledge of actual finances. A stranger guessing at a ransom picks a round number. An insider who has been sitting at the same dinner table for 20 years and heard real conversations about real money lands on 6 million. But here is why the financial motive does not hold up. The FBI sent a small test deposit to that Bitcoin wallet immediately after receiving the demand. Standard investigative procedure. That wallet has been completely silent ever since. 0 transactions, not a single movement. People who understand cryptocurrency know there are privacy tools that make tracing Bitcoin movement extremely difficult. If this was genuinely about collecting money, someone would have at least tested a small transaction. Nothing has happened. The silence of that wallet confirms what the medications on the counter already indicated. The ransom demand was never about collecting money. It was a narrative device designed to push investigators toward a financial motive. And then there is the language in one of those ransom communications. One note used the phrase "the main individual." You do not describe yourself as the main individual unless there are secondary individuals operating under you. That single phrase described the structure of a two-person operation inside a ransom note. 19 years of band rehearsals. 19 years of a drummer reading a bassist movement before it happens, responding to cues that never needed to be spoken. That level of coordination does not stay inside a rehearsal room. But two-person criminal operations always have a breaking point. The moment arrives when one person realizes the other would let them take the full weight of everything to survive. In this case, that moment may already be here because the FBI is not waiting for a confession. DNA processing is underway at a private laboratory in Florida. The mixed biological sample from inside NY's home is being analyzed. The glove profile may resolve first because it appears to be a cleaner sample. When those profiles complete, they enter genealogy databases. A partial match to a distant relative is the only thread investigators need. 2 DNA profiles means 2 independent family trees. 2 separate chances for a genetic hit. Cell tower records do not require anyone to talk. Purchase histories do not require a confession. 10,000 hours of surveillance footage do not need a witness to come forward. The evidence is building on its own. Savannah Guthrie announced a $1 million cash reward. Anonymous tips accepted. $1 million makes loyalty very difficult to maintain. On March 2nd, exactly 1 month after Nancy disappeared, Tommaso appeared in public for the first time since the night she was taken. He walked with Annie and Savannah to the memorial outside NY's home. No statement, no interview, no direct message to whoever has Nancy. Just a public appearance at the 1-month mark with cameras present. That was his first public appearance in nearly 5 weeks. The man who drove Nancy home on the last night she was seen. And silent for a month while his wife posted emotional videos asking for help. Silent while Savannah made public appeals and offered a $1 million reward. Grief does not operate that way. It looks for any outlet it can find. Deliberate silence over 5 weeks is a choice. And it is specifically the choice that people make when an attorney has advised them that anything they say could be used as evidence. The DNA is being processed. The genealogy databases are active. The vehicle footage exists. The cell tower data has been pulled. Nancy Guthrie deserves answers. If someone watching this saw something that did not make sense, a late-night vehicle, a conversation that fell off, a purchase that seemed unusual, the tip line is active. The reward is $1 million in cash. Call 1-800. Call FBI and subscribe to Weather Drives and turn on notifications. When this case moves forward, we will cover every development as it happens.